tree stood almost independent in the garden, and it was a tree found standing in the garden of the poets. And there were birds singing from the tree all through the night. So during day and night there were the birds sitting in the tree and singing. And the tree became very dear to the poet because it is the only bond between the poet's past and present. When she was born in the house, she found the tree and she played under the tree. And she left the house, went to England, France and Germany, and after many years returned to her home country and stayed in the same house, and there was still the tree. And the tree actually was a bridge that served between, it appeared to be a bridge between her past and present. The tree became very dear to her. And the tree reminded her childhood days that she spent under the tree along with her siblings. And there were her siblings, Abju and Arun. And they were the siblings, Abju and Arun. And she played under the Causurina tree with her siblings, Abju and Arun. And remember that Toru Dutt died due to consumption. So due to tuberculosis, and her siblings also died due to consumption in their early life. And she could remember her siblings. Whenever she found the tree, she remembered her childhood days. And she played under the tree with her siblings, Abju and Arun. And she hopes that the tree will be remembered forever. That this tree will be remembered forever, like the yew tree of Barrowdale, immortalized by Wordsworth. And in this context, we remember the poem written by William Wordsworth, entitled Yew Trees of Barrowdale. The poem written by Wordsworth is entitled Yew Trees. And when it was published in a collection in 1803, Wordsworth produced the poem in 1803. Remember that Wordsworth brought out the lyrical ballads in 1798. And 1803 was actually the productive year in the life of, in the career of Wordsworth. And Wordsworth produced the poem Yew Trees. And so it was entitled Yew Trees of the Barrowdale. And it was about a tree that he had found in a village called Lorton. Wordsworth had found a tall yew tree in a village called Lorton, Lorton. And the tree was 27 feet high, tall. And it had almost 1,000 years of age. It was so about 1,000 years old. And Wordsworth immortalized the yew tree in his poem, Yew Trees of Barrowdale. And Toru Dutt makes a comparison between the tree found in her garden, the Causurina tree, with the yew tree immortalized by William Wordsworth. Toru Dutt hopes that the tree will be remembered forever, like the yew tree of Barrowdale, immortalized by William Wordsworth. I told you Wordsworth produced a poem called Yew Trees in 1803, and he spoke about a tree in the village of Lorton that seemed very tall, 27 feet tall, and thousands of years of age. And Toru Dutt says that the Causurina tree in the garden of her house will become immortalized like the yew tree, immortalized by Wordsworth in his poem. And the poem closes with the line, "May love defend thee from oblivion's curse." And the poem ends with the line, "May love defend thee, defend you, O you Causurina tree, you will be saved from the curse of oblivion, forgetfulness, The tree will be able to remember the things that she had seen, the things that took under her shade, the things that took place in her presence. So, she may please be saved from the curse of forgetfulness. And actually it's a short poem. There are 5 stanzas and each stanza contains 10 lines. So in fact there are 50 lines in the poem, entitled Our Caussurina Tree. And one question was asked by UGC from this poem. By whom the poem was written was the question asked by UGC. It was a direct question. And after Toru Dutt, we come to find Sri.Aurobindo. Aurobindo was also one of the earliest of Indian writers in English. Aurobindo was born in 1872 and has been regarded as a great Indian philosopher, yogi, guru, poet and nationalist. And he was also born in Calcutta. And he studied at King's College, Cambridge. Fortunately, he had the occasion to study in King's College, Cambridge. He started his education in the English schools in Darjeeling. And from there he went to Cambridge and studied at King's College. And after returning to India, he joined the Indian freedom movement. And it was at the time there was the Indian freedom movement strongly holding its power and the young men joining the movement. And Aurobindo, on returning, after completing his civil service training, became employed in the colonial government of India, but at the same time showed affinity to the Indian freedom movement and was arrested and put in the Alipur jail. He was put in the Alipur jail for writing against the British government. So in fact, when he started writing against the British government in support of the nationalistic movement, he was arrested and put in the jail of Alipur. And while staying in the jail, he had a mysterious experience. He found Vivekananda coming to him in his dreams. So one night, Swami Vivekananda came to him in his dreams. And Vivekananda, so we know he is a very popular Indian yogi, and so he has been regarded as a great Indian saint all over the world. And he was a disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was an illiterate saint of India, sannyasi. And after all, Vivekananda became the disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and started the Sri Ramakrishna mission. And Vivekananda was a great yogi. And he was born in 1863 and died in 1902. Vivekananda had only a very short life, and he died in 1902. So at the age of 45. And Vivekananda is very popular all over the world as a great Indian sannyasi, a religious teacher and a great orator. And about Vivekananda, we always remember his great speech in the Parliament of Religions in America. Say it was in Chicago. Vivekananda produced his famous Chicago speech in 1893. And he was invited to give a speech at the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago. Vivekananda went to America and gave a speech in the Parliament of the World's Religions. And he started his speech by addressing the people as sisters and brothers of America. And the people became convinced that his address. When he called the people of America as his sisters and brothers, he addressed them as sisters and brothers of America. And his speech was applauded and greatly admired by the people. and he became a great Indian sannyasi, visiting the European countries and giving details about the Indian spirituality and Hindu mythology. And he continued to remain in America, England and many European countries, and went on delivering his speeches. And it is said that Vivekananda went to Chicago as a zero and came out as a hero. So it was flowers on his way when he returned India. And he was hailed as a great Indian saint. And when Aurobindo was staying in the Adipur jail for his involvement in the Indian nationalist movement, he had a mysterious experience of meeting Vivekananda in his dream. And the dream meeting changed his attitude. He left the nationalistic movement and became a yogi. And it changed him into the world of asceticism. And he came out of the jail, left politics, and became a sannyasi following spirituality. And in 1926, he founded the Sri.Aurobindo ashram in Pondicherry, along with a lady, and she was born and she was called Amma, and she was born in Paris. So he started the ashram in Pondicherry. He started the ashram in Pondicherry in 1926. And she was called Meera, M-I-R-R-A, Meera. And normally we come to find the picture of Meera sitting with a veena quite often. And it was she who joined with Aurobindo to start the ashram in Pondicherry. And after Aurobindo, it was Meera, and she was Meera Al-Fassa, belonging to Paris, born in Paris. And she came to India and joined with Aurobindo for starting the ashram, and continued with Aurobindo until his death, and became the head of the ashram after the death of Aurobindo. And she also became a spiritual leader, Meera, who was always called Mother Meera. And this is time we discuss the literary contributions of Aurobindo. Aurobindo is known for his epic poem Savitri, and Savitri is a very popular poem, long poem written by him based on Mahabharata. And Savitri is a long poem in 24,000 lines. And Savitri is subtitled A Legend and a Symbol. The story of Savitri taken from, so the virtuous lady Savitri taken from Mahabharata. And it was written as an epic, and he wrote it in blank verse. And there are about 24,000 lines in the long poem. Aurobindo is mainly popular for his poem called Savitri. And he had also produced many number of essays and spiritual works like The Life of Divine, about yoga and the practice of yoga. The Life of Divine and Savitri, A Legend and a Symbol are his famous works. And he had also produced many number of poems. For example, his poem Rose of God is discussed here. And it is a poem actually celebrating the glory of God. Rose of God. So it's a poem celebrating the glory of God, and it is one of the most anthologized of his poems. A Rose of God is one of the most anthologized of poems written by Sri.Aurobindo. And it is a poem celebrating the glory of God. And in the opening stanza of the poem, the rising sun is presented as having two attributes. The rising sun has got two attributes, and they are bliss and passion. And he comes to speak about the sun, the vermilion sun, the red-colored sun on the blue sky appears like the mark of kumkum. And he uses symbols also, metaphors also used by him. And he makes a comparison between the color of the sun with the color of kumkum on the forehead of a beautiful lady. So normally we come to find that there is kumkum on the forehead of the Indian ladies, and the color of the sun in the blue sky. The vermilion color of the sun in the blue sky is compared to the kumkumam is what called kumkum on the forehead of a beautiful lady. And the redness of the sun is the symbol of passion. And the blueness of the sky actually stands for infinity. Redness, symbol of passion. And the blue color sky actually stands for infinity. And this is the reason why Aurobindo calls the sun the passion flower of God. And we come to find many kind of metaphors, similes, used by Aurobindo in his poems. And the sun is called the passion flower of God. And he calls the sun bud of the mystical name, and he also calls the sun the Prajakshara Om. Om is called the Prajakshara, and sun is called Om or the Prajakshara. And according to him, the rising of the sun in the dawn, actually the sun that rises in the dawn produces the seven colored spectrum, or what we called the rainbow. The sun that rises in the dawn produces the seven colored spectrum, and the spectrum is compared to the seven levels of ecstasy in yoga. And he compares, so the rising sun producing the seven colored spectrum as the seven levels of ecstasy in yoga. So in yoga there are the seven levels of ecstasy, and they are like the seven colors found in the spectrum produced by the rising sun in the dawn. The rising sun in the dawn produces the seven colored spectrum, and they are compared to the seven levels of yoga. And he calls the sun golden flower of mystery. And he calls the sun the golden flower of mystery. And the sun is the maker of time. And the sun represents the Godhead. Actually, the sun is the maker of time, and it is the marker of time. And as such, the sun represents the Godhead that is beyond all time. And he calls the sun the quest of the marvelous hour. He calls the sun the quest of the marvelous hour. And when we get into the third stanza of the poem, he calls the sun the source of all power. And actually here he speaks about the glory of sun. And science tells us that the fuels, the firewood, the coal, water, and all originate from solar light. And the importance of sunlight is identified by the scientists also. And they say that the sun is the originator of fuels, firewood, coal, water, and everything in the earth. And the sun can be called the grandeur of light. And the sun is also the damask force of infinity, the red color of infinity. And the power of sun actually shatters the darkness of ignorance. The darkness of ignorance is shattered by the power of the sun. and he calls the sun the rose of God. And the question, the fundamental question, what is the rose of God? The rose of God is sun. And he calls the sun the rose of God, the rose of life, the rose of power, the rose of love, and the rose of bliss. And the poem is entitled Rose of God. And actually it is the sun, the damask colored sun. So the red colored sun, the vermilion colored sun, that produces the spectrum in the morning, the golden flower of mystery, the marker of time, the quest of the marvelous hour, the source of all the power, the grandeur of light, the red force of infinity, and the sunlight shatters the darkness of ignorance. And the sun is called the rose of God, the rose of life, the rose of power, the rose of love, and the rose of bliss. And remember the poems of Aurobindo also, and there may be questions asked from Aurobindo also. Aurobindo, we have to remember his long poem Savitri, based on Mahabharata, written in blank verse, contains 24,000 lines, and it is the very popular poem written by Aurobindo. And he had also produced many literary works on the practice of yoga. So he produced many literary works on the practice of Karma Yoga, Brahma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Indra Yoga, and the practice of yoga was the subject of Aurobindo. And after Aurobindo, we come to find Rabindranath Tagore, the Indian polymath. Tagore is considered as the Indian polymath. So he was poet, novelist, playwright, essayist, thinker, philosopher, educator, and whatnot. He was all rolled into one. And this is the reason why he is called a polymath. So a genius of multiple areas, a versatile genius. Tagore is considered as polymath. And he became the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize in 1913. Actually, he won the Nobel Prize in 1913, and it was he who won the Nobel Prize from a non-European country. It was he who received the Nobel Prize from the Asiatic country for the first time. It was in 1913.